Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, it's a great show because Shane Toven is with us. He's actually coming to us live from a mountaintop transmitter site in Laramie, Wyoming. How about that? Chris Tobin is along as well. We got some great stories and some great tips about mountaintop engineering next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, saving, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By the new Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. And by the Telos Alliance, shaping the future of audio, inspiring you to create the most exciting and engaging audio experiences imaginable. Visit telosalliance.com/opt-in.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. So delighted to be here. I'm here back in my usual office in Nashville, Tennessee. I work for the folks at the Telos Alliance, so that's kind of my bias here. But we try to do a fair show, talk about broadcast engineering, everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. Going to be bringing our guest in just a minute. He's a lot closer to the top of the tower than he is to the microphone. But first, let's bring in our co-host, Chris Tobin from somewhere in the New York City area. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Hello, Kirk. Hello, everyone. No, I'm in the usual voice tracking booth. When all else fails, I jump in here, sort of like Clark Kent, and turn things on and make things happen. And here we go.
Do we ever see you from? I assume you have an engineering office there at your radio station.
Yeah, I have an office, but it's not even worth it. It's a little cubicle, actually. It's not an office.
Ah, okay. I thought you might have a tech center with lots of junk behind it. You know.
Well, I could do the tech center as well, but we're doing some other work in there right now, so it doesn't work. I've done it before. Maybe after 66 blocks, I can bring those back out and everybody reminiscing about those days. If I could just find those Christmas tree blocks, that'd be even more fun.
Oh, no, please. Oh, gosh. Burned fingers galore. Oh, gee, man. I wonder if the company that invented those ever got sued over that. Holy cow. What a dangerous piece of equipment. Christmas trees.
Classic stuff. And 3M scotch, little scotch locks that you could stick on them, and avoid having to do all the soldering every time.
I did not know that scotch locks fit onto Christmas trees.
You can make them fit depending on how you use them. Yeah.
Okay. Now, of course, I put them on punch blocks quite a bit, but not on Christmas trees.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
The classics.
Okay.
Yeah, the classics.
Good deal. Well, hey, thanks for being here. Anything spectacular going on your end of the world?
No, just it's July 4th week, Independence Day this week, and we had the fireworks, New York City, Macy's fireworks, Jersey City had their fireworks with the Grucci family, and then all across the boroughs, people had their own fireworks in the neighborhood. So if you're on a high rooftop, you can check out the big fireworks display on the East River, and then you could also look at all the little ones on the horizon. So it was a lot of fun. It was great weather.
I watched all of the fireworks from the East River last night with my son, who couldn't care less about it. I don't know why, but I thought it was spectacular. That was amazing. It seems like if you were anywhere in New York City with with an east facing window, you could probably see it, because they had at about 6 locations firing fireworks, 4 main ones, and then 6 smaller ones firing up fireworks. You could see it from all over the place, couldn't you?
Yeah, there were, I believe, 7 barges. It was about a mile in length, and you could see it. It started at 42nd Street, East 42nd Street, and East River, and made its way down to, I think, the Brooklyn Bridge just before that. And yeah, there's a lot to see. If you're on the Queens side, Queens and Brooklyn, you got to see a really great view because a lot of low buildings. In Manhattan, you'd have to be on the east side of Manhattan for the most part. And if you're on the rooftops of most buildings, most residential buildings, you can get to the rooftop. You got to see a nice display. It was great.
Wow, it was great on television. The one thing, now I was watching, a 1 hour delay. I'm pretty sure we were on a 1 hour delay with our local NBC affiliate, but I was watching over an OTT service. I was watching via YouTube Live, or I'm sorry, YouTube TV. And I don't know why I shouldn't have. I should have switched it over to the antenna and gotten the HD feed right off my local station. I don't know why I went to YouTube, but I did. And honestly, the quality was pretty horrible. Especially the audio. The audio was just pathetic. The crowd noise would change in timbre dramatically, almost sound like the codec was changing speed. It was awful. And it's about the end of the thing I realized, I've been sitting here listening to this. I should go check, the actual off the air HD signal and see if this is an NBC problem or a YouTube problem or what. But anyway, the YouTube delivery was awful. Did you get to watch any of it on TV? Muted.
There we go. There we go. I was fortunate enough to be on the rooftop and actually get to see it in real time. So there was no delay, no stuttering,
Yeah.
sputtering, or macro blocking of the video. But I did get to watch some of the replays on the local NBC O&O here in town, and it was great. And NBC
Okay.
does a great job of covering it and the way they handle it. And it's even more fun when you're on a rooftop and you look up into the sky and you see and hear helicopters all around you, most of which are media coverage of some sort, picture taking and stuff and video as well.
I noticed both in the NBC's long shots from a helicopter and closer shots from near the bandstand, there was another helicopter just kept going through their shot over and over and over. Gee, man, can't we get a shot without somebody else's helicopter in there?
It's probably a company that's hired to shoot video for the event, the promotional videos. You'd be surprised the stuff that goes on.
Yeah, probably so. All right, enough about all that here in Nashville. Obviously, I stayed home last night. We have great fireworks in Nashville for Independence Day, but it's also extremely crowded, and I just didn't feel like going down there to downtown with my son and doing all that. And my wife didn't feel like it at all, so we stayed home. We did go to a fireworks display, though, the weekend before, up in a little town called White House, Tennessee, and enjoyed that. In fact, I took a slow-mo video of some fireworks and put them on my Facebook page. That's kind of interesting. All right. Hey, enough about all that. Let's bring in our guest. He's waiting patiently high atop some mountain. I don't know where he is. Shane Toven, welcome in. Glad you're here, buddy.
From an undisclosed mountaintop location somewhere near Laramie, Wyoming.
Okay. Oh, so you're going to drive home tonight then?
Oh, yeah. I'll be home this evening. I actually had a wonderful 4th of July yesterday, had the day off. And actually, I spent my 4th of July mixing sound in the park for several musical acts. We have a big festival here in Laramie called Freedom Has a Birthday every 4th of July. Lots of food, lots of fun, lots of stuff going on. Everybody comes out for it. And, of course, you've got all the people coming into town who are visiting relatives or just visiting Laramie for whatever reason. And it's a really good time. So it was quite the blast. Didn't get a chance to go out and see the fireworks last night, but there were plenty of people, for better or worse, firing off their own fireworks around us. I mean, this is Wyoming after all.
Yeah. That's a great title, though. Freedom's Birthday, because that's pretty cool.
Freedom has a birthday.
Freedom has a birthday. Yeah. And I saw your pictures of your, at least the teardown of your mixing at the park. So.
Yeah, it was kind of cool, actually. The stage was, I had a little pop-up tent set up, and I had no snake or anything. I was mixing wirelessly with an iPad for the act on the stage. So it was
really cool stuff. I want to hear about that.
That's what I do when I'm not playing broadcast engineer.
So, hey, for those of you who are listening to our podcast audio only, Shane's audio is going to be a little bit rough. He's got a lot of noise to overcome there. He's at a transmitter site with a noisy transmitter. And actually, we're doing a pretty good job of keeping the noise down and letting Shane's voice come through. But listen carefully, and maybe we'll try to boost Shane's voice just a bit more. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Lavo, LAWO.com. When you go to their website, lavo.com/TWiRT to take you right to the radio products page. We're going to hear from Lavo first about the Ruby console. Be right back with some amazing stories and great advice from the man on top of the mountain, Shane Toven. We'll be right back.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while. So why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes. And enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to Lavo for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We sure appreciate it. And do check out their website, lavo.com/TWiRT. That'll let them know that we sent you, and you'll take you right to the radio section. You can see all the consoles and the routing gear and things like that at lavo.com/TWiRT. Okay, it's Kirk Harnack, Chris Tobin. We're talking with Shane Toven. Shane and I actually got to work together for a while. He was at the Telos Alliance for a while. Shane, welcome back in. And it seems like I met you, Shane, at what was at the time a Clear Channel radio station cluster in Minnesota. Do I have that right?
It was either a Clear Channel cluster in Minnesota, or it may have been Minnesota Public Radio, more than likely. That was kind of the second stage of my broadcast career. So.
Gotcha. And from there, you moved out to what, Wyoming Public Media?
I spent a year working for Enco in technical support, and then I moved out to Wyoming and did Wyoming Public Media for about 7 years. Yeah,
that took you to some crazy mountaintop sites right there, didn't it?
Oh my goodness! All around the state of Wyoming, something like 30 some odd signals just within the state of Wyoming. Everything from just absolutely beautifully built sites to some sites that kind of look at and went, ugh. But sometimes you got to do the best you can and just make the best of it and fix it up as best you can.
So I'm a little bit curious about FM coverage in Wyoming. Now you work in between. You worked with Telos, and I was your colleague there. But now you work for a company that covers a lot of ground with religious programming. And I'm curious about covering populations in a state like Wyoming or other, not very populated states. And so with Wyoming Public Media and the people you work with now, you really have had a chance to kind of understand site selection versus population versus needing to cover maybe interstate highways. Talk to me a bit about what's important to a broadcaster like Wyoming Public Media or your current employer in selecting sites and selecting coverage.
Sure, and it really depends. The philosophies can be different depending on the on the management of the organization. Like for instance, Wyoming Public Media, the mandate was pretty much cover the state, the entire state, including all of the antelopes and jackrabbits and freeways, at least as much as practical and as much as possible. That's why we had there were a couple of flamethrowers. I mean, we had a 100 kilowatt flamethrower here in Laramie. We had, I think it was a 50 kilowatt over on the southwestern part of the state, over by Rock Springs. But we also had a whole bunch of little 500 watts, 2 kilowatts, a bunch of Class A's all over the place. I started with the 100 kilowatt Class C flamethrowers, so that was kind of my background, and that was what I had the most experience with. So I started looking at some of these low powers and went, how does that cover anything? But then I'm starting to learn, you put that up on a mountain, it actually can cover quite a bit of territory. So yeah, with Wyoming Public Radio, we had 30 some odd signals on some very high mountaintops. And they did manage to cover most of the state. And Wyoming isn't a very populated state. There are only about, somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people in the whole state. The population of Denver is something like, what is it now? It's like several million or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the priority in that case was covering the whole state. So obviously, you would choose sites and choose power levels accordingly. And the philosophy, and this philosophy was kind of in place even before I got there. The philosophy was lower power signals, but more of them, and just cover the population pockets as much as possible, but also focus on covering some of the areas that aren't quite as populated. A lot of that relied on some fringe coverage, and that of course is diminishing as the FM band gets a little more crowded. You can't rely on coverage outside of, say, the 60 and heck, even the 50 dBu contour now is getting hard to listen to these days. you'll notice that the radio spectrum, just in general, has become a lot noisier. So yeah, it's harder to cover those fringe populations without actually putting signals close to them. My current employer, on the other hand, I've got a 3-state area, and the focus is on covering population and population count. So the signals are designed and placed such that they cover specific population areas and population count. So, and it's all calculated. You look at the population coverage, and you figure out what power level can cover that area and where it needs to be placed, and that's what you go with. So.
That's a pretty interesting comparison. I want to ask Chris, of course, a populated area like New York City, New Jersey, all around that northeastern part of the U.S. where population density is so high. So in Wyoming, and you kind of said what I figured would be the case. You had a mandate from the state for Wyoming public media to cover the state. And that may not mean every jackrabbit, but certainly wherever people live and maybe a little bit beyond, you want to make sure people get coverage. But your current employer, they want to cover people. They're not as concerned about jackrabbits. So, the focus is a bit different. And then this idea of, for years, earlier in my career, I was pretty much only involved with U.S. broadcasting. And that tends to be the biggest power you can get a license for to cover the biggest area from a centralized location. And then I went to France, and it was completely different. With that, you had a little transmitter in every town, and it may have been a 500-watt transmitter, it may have been a 1,000-watt transmitter, and then in Paris you may have had, I don't know, 5,000 or 10,000-watt transmitter on the Eiffel Tower. But the philosophy was quite different, and this opened up a whole new world to me. It's going on all kinds of places. There's 2 basic different ways to cover. Chris Tobin, talk to me about coverage and site selection in a densely populated area like New York City.
Well, here in New York, you only have a couple of choices for locations to transmit from. Two tall buildings, maybe 3 tall buildings. You look for the density. It depends on your format, really, because the stations I've worked with over the years in the metropolitan area, we've had signals covering the, how would you say, predominant zip codes for the days of Arbitron diaries and where's the most populated areas, and that's where the signal would go. So even in something like New York City, where a lot of the audience for certain formats is in, say, northern New Jersey or parts of New Jersey or Connecticut, there are some stations who have positioned their signals off center from Manhattan. And then there are those that are just in New York City proper, and they cover the entire area and go for the best. So it all depends on where you are. In Wyoming, I'm sure it's going to be different because it's a larger geographic area, sparsely populated, and rightfully so. So you have to go accordingly. It varies here in the Big Apple. Some stations just blanket automatic. Others, they do look for areas because there are a few Class A's or Class B ones, I think they call them now, that are located not exactly at the Empire State Building, World Trade Center, 4 Times Square, or those are the big 3 sticks, if you will, landlords. There are some located on other buildings outside the city, just across the river. There is 1 or 2 tower sites that host I think there's 2 stations out there. There's one up north near Westchester that's covering New York City, but they want more of the Westchester and Lower Fairfield County, Connecticut. So it does vary. There are some places that some broadcasters who know specifically what geographical area they want to go for. Yeah.
So Shane, I guess so. You're just outside Laramie at a site. I've been a kind of a flatlander transmitter guy for most of my life, and I guess Chris has too. A few hills here and there, and tall buildings. But for me, a hill it's not going to be very tall at all, or at least around here in Nashville. What's it like? What's different there in Wyoming? If I came there, what would I have to learn about? What would I be surprised about at your transmitter sites?
Well, one of the things you'd be most surprised about is that access to these sites can be difficult. I mean, you're talking having to go through some roads that are just 4-wheel drive only. In the wintertime, you may be taking a snowcat to them. We have these things out here called mountains. And that was something that I had to get used to. I myself, being a flatlander from Minnesota originally, where a hill was maybe 200 feet. They had big, tall towers back there. The stations that I worked for in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, I mean, there was like a 10-station combined plant there, and that tower was something like 1,500, 2,000 feet tall. I mean, you just don't see that out here because they get put on top of a mountain that is already something like 2,000 feet above average terrain. For instance, prime example, the site that I'm at right now, the town of Laramie is about 7,000 feet. This site is closer to 8,800, 9,000 feet. So.
Yeah, so it's already a couple thousand feet higher than Laramie. So how tall a tower do you have there? Oh, and is human exposure to RF radiation a problem if the tower is just tall enough to just hold the antenna barely?
Well, and again, that depends on the site. That depends on the mountain. A lot of towers are just high enough that or under the height where they have to be lit. So you don't see a lot of lit towers on mountaintops unless they're just, unless they're over that 200-foot threshold, or unless the FAA has determined that they need to be lit because they pose an obstruction hazard. They're in the middle of a path. For instance, on this mountaintop, one of the towers is lit, the others are not, and it's just the way it is. But yeah, average is usually somewhere around that 200-foot mark or less on these mountaintops.
Do you ever get? I mean, I think I've seen pictures of transmitter sites where, well, I know I have. Where the lowest bay of a multi-bay antenna was, maybe in arm's reach from the ground. Is that the case there ever?
I have seen some sites like that. I try to avoid sites like that personally because it poses some RFR issues. But I've seen the sites that are designed that way, and you really have to be careful. You have to make sure that the things are still fenced off, posted, signs are posted, or at least that it's a site that's not generally accessible to the public. So you have to take precautions in those cases. I don't think it's good practice to locate your antenna so close to the ground that you can literally reach out and touch it, but I've seen some sites where it's pretty close to that.
Well, yeah, at that height, do you think that the ground itself would start to have a detuning effect or a reflective effect on the signal you're trying to put out? You think you'd want to get that thing up a little bit? Exactly.
You want it, I would say at least a wavelength off the ground. I mean, come on. But I've seen some sites where you've got, 20, 30, 40-foot towers and, on top of a tall mountaintop, and you've got maybe a single bay or a 2-bay or even in some cases a 4-bay if the tower's a little taller. And sometimes they play with the spacing of the bays. And,
I recently saw a picture. I saw a picture of an antenna in Hawaii that was mounted in such a way that the bottom bay was actually touching the ground because bad installation. And they didn't plan on the room. So, the bottom bay was actually in the grass. That doesn't seem like a good idea.
And sadly, I do see a lot of that, of the cowboy engineering out here from other owners and various things. But, if I have anything to do with the engineering, I try to make sure that it's engineered in a responsible way, up in the air where it belongs. Not going to pose any RFR issues. Not going to be interfered with by the ground.
So what kind of what kind of FM transmitter power levels do you have around your area? I mean, do you have them up as high as we've seen? I mean, like in the 25, 27 kilowatt area, or are they generally in the tens? What size?
Well, the site that I'm at right now, the noise you hear in the background is actually a BE FM 30 whirring away at full volume, full tilt. So, and that's feeding like a very large antenna, like an 8-bay antenna up above me quite some distance. So, but on the other side of the spectrum, you've got some that are as little as like a little Crown FM 30, feeding maybe even as little as a single bay in the case of like a 10-watt translator or something. And some of those 10-watt translators, it's astonishing how far they can go when placed on top of a mountain that's a couple thousand feet above the average terrain.
Well, I understand that we got voice and data back from the moon on 75 watts. So radio waves will travel quite a long way. Yes, and of course, now you're in an area that where the FCC allows Class C FM stations, which are 100,000 watts at a couple thousand feet. Now, but you also have Class A stations there too. And in fact, oh gosh, close to 30 years ago, I almost became involved in ownership of a Class A there in Laramie. Later, I think somebody else got it, and I think at least for a while, it was called K-Moose. Is that still there?
I don't know that the K-Moose is still here, but I'm sure that allocation and that station are probably still around in some form. So.
Okay. Wow. So, Shane, we were talking about, before the show, we were talking about how weather is such a factor there. And I'm curious about that. I mean, does the weather, does it actually pose a threat to human life if you get stuck on at a transmitter site when some weather rolls in? What are your factors there?
It does play a huge factor, and primarily in the wintertime, but in the spring, fall, pretty much any season. I mean, yes, lightning can be a consideration at sites if you're somewhere where you have a little bit taller. Well, you don't even need a tall tower. I mean, lightning can strike the top of a mountain and really strike anywhere. So you have to be conscious of the weather. But the biggest challenge that I've faced, weather-related, has been access to sites. Again, mountaintops, poorly maintained. Well, what you can barely call roads in some cases. I mean, you're talking more like trails, 4x4 type trails in some cases. They get muddy in the spring and in the fall. They get snowy in the winter. You're talking about four-wheel drive pickup at the very least during the times when there's not snow on the ground. And when there is snow on the ground, you're talking probably a snow machine of some sort to get in.
Wow. Okay. You don't post too many pictures of that. I know a couple of our friends in the business, especially Tracy Teagarden in Las Vegas, sometimes post pictures from Mount Potosi. And what a difficult and dangerous trek that is, and some other friends of ours have posted stuff like that. I'd love to see some more pictures if you'd think to take them from time to time.
Yeah, I'd love to take some more pictures, but I've been lately taking a lot of scenery pictures from my sites and posting them on my personal page. So yeah, and then in the wintertime, once you get up here, once you get up to some of these sites in the wintertime, the views are just absolutely gorgeous. Actually, any time of year from this height, the views just are spectacular.
I bet. Wow. Chris Tobin, I mean, makes me feel a little jealous and yet a little bit thankful that sites that I tend to go to might have a little bit of a mud hole in Mississippi, but other than that, they're pretty easy. And Chris, your sites aren't so. I guess your the biggest problem is ID and permission. Yeah.
Yeah. ID permission. Yeah, my tall mountain is 1,700 feet building. Building.
Yeah.
And requires biometric, positive visual ID. What was the other thing we had to do? There's 3 forms of access control. So yeah, and you have to renew it every 3 weeks. So you have to make sure it's always current. Otherwise, you can. There's 2 lights that turn on: red, green. And needless to say, you know which one you want always turning on. So when you swipe the card in front of the guy in the glass window, and it goes red, and you hear a latch lock even tighter, that's when you know your car is no longer working. And then you're asked to step away from the door and back into the other entry point. So yeah.
Oh,
yeah, those are big buildings.
Shane, I've got to ask a little embarrassing question. What about the personal hygiene facilities available at your transmitter sites? You got any?
Let's just say the engineer who travels to mountaintops on a regular basis is always prepared.
Okay.
There are various ways that you can deal with that. Keeping toiletries in the truck and various other things, and yeah. So there are ways, and yes, that is definitely a consideration at a lot of these sites. They don't have running water, of course. I had a site when I was in the Twin Cities that, of course, had running water, had full bathroom, facilities, and that's pretty common at a lot of old television sites.
Oh yeah,
but out on these mountaintop sites, if they did have any sort of water facilities at all, they've long since been decommissioned since the sites are no longer manned. So
yeah, these old sites, even old AM. Clear channel type sites like here in Nashville, WSM. I mean, it's got a gorgeous tile bathroom with a toilet that is so old and yet so beautiful. It's gorgeous, and it may even have a shower there. I forget if it does or not, but I've been to sites that had a typically not working, but yeah, they had a shower at one time. I guess maybe when travel was, when they got to the site by horseback. I don't know. Shane, one more thing before we take a break. Finding a site for the first time, you said that not every site is accurately mapped by Google Maps, or at least not a way to get there.
Well, let's just say there are roads. You can usually see them on satellite imagery, but if you poke a set of coordinates into a GPS and expect it to get you there, you're going to wind up somewhere completely different from where you want to be.
Oh.
You might get there eventually. You might you might actually see the tower. You might think, hey, I can get there from there. But what the GPS is trying to do is route you onto some road that goes across private land or is barely a cattle trail, if that. It goes through some farmer's field. So the GPS does not always know in fact, frequently does not know the best way to get to the site. So you have to rely on local contractors who have been to the site. Hopefully someone has documented really good directions. I mean, we've all heard the horror stories about the general manager who has to go out to the transmitter site and say, I don't know where that is. you know, so we try to avoid that. But yeah, I mean, you can get in the neighborhood generally with GPS if you can find the nearest the closest landmark to your, major landmark to your coordinates. But some of these sites, I mean, they just get so far out there, you have to rely on someone local to take you out there for the first time or have well-documented directions.
Actually, this is for completely different reasons. This is the same as New York City. With Chris, I mean, a GPS will lead you to the building, but that won't get you to the transmitter room by any means at all. Isn't that right, Chris?
Oh, that is true. That is true. And lately, there have been some buildings that suddenly no longer appear on the GPS maps, too.
I see. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I was now for my own self. Most every site I go to is just GPS it. Bam, the road goes right there, and the only thing that's not there is the muddy path that's 200 feet from the road to the building. But in Hawaii, at the little station that I got involved in there, I've not been to the transmitter site. It's a helicopter ride only to get there. You can't drive there, and you could hike there, but I'm told that people of our stature as engineers are probably not going to make it by hiking, only if you're really fit as a fiddle. So I haven't been to that site, which is helicopter only, and I'm told that there's just barely room for the helicopter to land. And now I've heard of other sites where the helicopter doesn't land. Also in Hawaii, on the island of Oahu, I've heard of a site where the helicopter can put down its skids, but there's not enough room to actually set down and land and wait. It's going to drop you off and pick you up with the rotors running and with most of the weight taken off of the skid. So that's kind of scary. Well, hey, folks, you are watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech. It's our episode number 402. Chris Tobin is here from the New York City area, and Shane Toven is here from a mountaintop in the Laramie, Wyoming area. He's doing engineering for a company there, and he's got a lot of experience with mountaintop sites. We're going to hear some tips and tricks from Shane, and also a few stories about kind of how he got interested and some got his feet wet and his hands dirty in engineering when we finish as we move through the show here. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by my friends at the Telos Alliance and the Omnia 9 audio processor. Now, the Omnia 9 has got a brand new software upgrade that's available for it, and it is just terrific. It's a real move up. Now, if you've got an Omnia 9, like my friend Bob Newberry in Birmingham, Alabama, he's got one he doesn't want to upgrade because it's been on for 6 straight years. He doesn't want to ruin the uptime by rebooting it. But there is a new software upgrade available for it. Hey, if we can, Suncast, let's have a look at a couple pictures of the Omnia 9 from the brochure, if you've got that available. And I want to tell you about the, if I can find it here, tell you about what is available in the upgrade for the Omnia 9. It's now shipping with a major update to the audio engine, making it sound better than ever. The update is available as a software download for existing Omnia 9 users at no charge. So you got an Omnia 9, this is a free update. The features include a major system rewrite to the audio engine, including a new lower latency clipper for both AM and FM versions. It has a new fully rewritten streaming engine that now supports Shoutcast 2. It has FLAC and lossless streaming, if that is interesting to you, and an integrated internal stream server for confidence monitoring or whatever you need. Phase correction with mono bass that reduces multipath distortion, and expanded SNMP features so you can more easily monitor more functions over SNMP, shared processing path for AM HD units, and improved BS412 MPX power limiter. So if you are in Europe, that BS412 MPX power limiting is important for you. Also, it's got seamless preset switching. Before, if you change presets, you'd hear a pretty good difference real quick while things corrected. Well, now that preset switching is seamless, so you can better compare presets and not have to ignore a second or two of audio while things were settling in. And that's even between presets with major structural differences. The new update also enables optional micro MPX encoding, making the Omnia 9 the first hardware processor to support this revolutionary codec, micro MPX. It offers full composite MPX over 320 kilobits per second. Now, also, this update will enable LiveWire and AES67 to give you more flexible I/O. Now, this is shipping in new units. If you buy an Omnia 9, it'll come with LiveWire plus AES67 and all the things I just talked about. If you have an older Omnia 9, you can have it upgraded. There's a few hardware upgrades that go on inside of it. You can send that off to Telos support, both in the U.S. and in Europe, and they will upgrade it for you. There's a cost for that hardware upgrade. It's as low as they could possibly make it. It's under $1,000. But if you buy a brand new Omnia 9, you get all that upgrade in there already. Check out the website at telosalliance.com. And if it's not updated now, it'll be updated within the next day or two with a link to download the new Omnia 9 software. If you're keeping track, this version is 3.18.99. That's 3.18.99 is this new free upgrade for the Omnia 9. And I wanted to show you something here in my office that I just love about the Omnia 9 and the Omnia 7 processor. I'm gonna I hate doing this, but I'm gonna grab the camera here, turn it around in the office here, and let's see if we can straighten that up. There we go. That's what I get to look at when I want to. Big display of the Omnia. That's actually the Omnia 7 that is going on at my station in Hawaii. So in the lower right-hand corner, you see that full MPX spectrum display, that FFT display there. That's pretty cool. We can see the incoming audio. Hey, I even sent a text to our morning man. That was about 1 o'clock this afternoon because he was in Hawaii. That, hey, dude, watch your levels, because those whole metering bars at the top show the input level. They were flashing red every now and then. And so that told me, hey, he's running that input, that level too hot on his board. So I just sent him a quick text. He said, okay. So lots of parameters there. And I'm watching that Omnia 7 that is sitting in a rack in Hawaii. Pretty amazing. And I can listen to it too. Of course, I got to turn down here during the show, but just so cool. Check out Omnia 7 and Omnia 9 and the Omnia 9 upgrade that's available to you free of charge at telosalliance.com. Or talk to support. You can send a support, an email if you like, support@telosalliance.com, and they will answer you that day. All right. Thanks a lot to Omnia 9, Leif Clayson, and Frank Foti, and everybody at the Telos Alliance for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. It's episode 402. Shane Tobin's with us. Chris Tobin is with us as well. And Shane, let's see. I got a note here. Let me go back and find it. Where did I put my note here about? Oh, yeah. You have some tips for mountaintop transmitter sites, and your first tip about regular maintenance being important at least annually. I'm going, what? Annually? You must have some clean air up there in the mountains. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, a good thorough check annually at the bare minimum. I know people who don't get out to their sites even once a year, and that's just, in my mind, quite frankly, that's just inexcusable to not get to your site at least once a year, preferably monthly. I mean, that would be ideal. If you can get to your site monthly, and yeah, even with some of the far-flung sites, you can still find a way to get them maintained on a monthly basis. This is where, and I think I mentioned in one of my other points there about contract engineers. Contract engineers are your best friend when it comes to maintaining your sites. And that annual check is mostly just to check in on the site, make sure that they've been doing their job, and just kind of maintaining that relationship with them. So that's kind of my tip there. I mean, yeah, annually is a bare minimum, but if you can't get to your site annually, well.
So you've got some good air filters behind you there. Tell me about what particulates, what's in the air on a mountaintop, if anything.
Well, that is one nice thing. The air is typically pretty clean. I mean, if we start getting wildfires around the area, you can start getting a lot of smoke and particulate coming through. Dust becomes an issue. One thing I like to see at sites, I like to see them well pressurized, positively pressurized, so that it kind of keeps the dust out. You have a good set of filters coming into the site and a nice airflow that just kind of keeps the site pressurized, keeps it clean. And sometimes, quite frankly, you got to deal with what with what you've got. I mean, if you don't own the site, you're dealing with a landlord, and you can't always modify the air handling system. Just try to keep your site as clean as you possibly can. I mean, go in there and vacuum it out on a regular basis. But yeah, dust is probably one of the biggest problems that I see.
Shane, I noticed that you're pretty big on site documentation, and this is where you and Chris Tobin excel, and I probably not so much. Talk to me about some of the things that you document at a site. I mean, on the one hand, you're documenting it for a contractor or other engineer, but these sites are not visited very often, and it's probably going to be you or your contractor. Why is documentation important? What are you documenting? And what problem are you trying to solve by leaving behind this kind of documentation?
Well, documentation is important first and foremost for legal compliance issues. I mean, there are certain things that you should have hanging at your site. I mean, you should have your station license hanging at the site. Yeah, I know there's some discussion about getting rid of that requirement, but it's still a good idea. I mean, if you walk into a site and see something amiss, it might be nice to know who to contact to tell, hey, your transmitter's on fire.
Okay.
But making sure your licenses are at the site and maybe any STL licenses or downlink licenses that you might have that would apply. Making sure a chief operator designation is posted at the site. Again, so somebody can know, who do I contact if there's a problem with this facility? Things like a proof. Have you done an FM proof lately on your stuff, or at least an RF proof on your on your stations to make sure that they are performing the way that you expect them to be performing? That needs to be documented. It should be included in your site. What your transmitter power output should be, and how you arrived at those numbers. If an inspector comes to your site, your transmitter is running at X amount of power. You want to demonstrate to them, oh, okay, that's how I arrived at those numbers. Okay, cool. So those are, from a compliance standpoint, the things that you want to document. But that's just one category of documentation. Oh, go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, I was wondering. You mentioned about RF spectrum, proofing that. Does this imply that you carry a spectrum analyzer with you? And do you get to a site, just kind of check it out, or do you get to a site and say, hey, that's new. Hey, ooh, there's a new, looks like a translator. I mean, are there people that cause problems that need to be checked out right away?
Yeah, I do carry a spec an with me, but normally the only time I would actually end up doing an RF proof is if I changed something of my own at a site, or if maybe there was some suspicion of something else causing a problem at a site. But most commonly, if I've changed something at a site, I want to make sure that plant is still performing the way it's supposed to be performing. If I change out the exciter, if I change out an audio processor, if I change out, if I have to install a bandpass filter, for instance, things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. I would think that power might be an occasional problem going off at these mountaintop sites. I know that in Las Vegas on Mount Potosi, they have a what do you call it? An unbalanced power feed. The ground itself is used as a return, so there's only one high voltage wire going up the side of the mountain, and it's not on poles. It's on the ground, insulated, or it's under or buried slightly. How are your sites typically fed with power?
Well, a lot of sites, it can be three-phase, it can be single-phase. I don't know that I have anything nearly as extreme as Potosi there, where there's just a single wire and ground. I actually am dealing with a site right now that is generator only, and having to reestablish service at that site, and that's
wow.
That's an interesting challenge, and that's going to keep me busy for most of the summer here. So.
Well, you mean it's just generator all the time right now?
Well, right now it's currently off because there were some issues with the generator plant, and basically that whole plant has to be reestablished. So now it's running from an auxiliary site at the moment, which is a good thing. But yeah, that's a new one on me is having a site that's generator powered only. So
for sites that are hard to get to, not just a little, but hard to get to, what are some of the extra precautions that you take that somebody, like me or may not take because our sites are easy to get to? Not that I'm there very often, but at least they're easy for somebody. The manager knows where the site is. He can go there. He can take his iPhone, do a FaceTime with me and say, here's what I'm looking at. but you don't really have that opportunity. If sites, take several hours to get to, and the weather may prove them to be impassable with the vehicle that you have with you that day. What do you do to help make sure things will stay on, and when the power goes off, when it comes back on, they'll come back on?
Well, first of all, you want to design the sites so that they are as robust as possible. You also want to make sure you've got, at the very minimum, a good UPS in the rack to keep all of your support gear alive. So at least if something does go wrong, it can call you and say, hey, something's going on here. You might want to check into this. In an ideal situation, you also have full generator backup of the plant. You have an auxiliary transmitter, or better yet, an auxiliary site that you can go to if something goes wrong. So those are, starting with just good engineering practice is always the best place when it comes to that sort of thing. And yeah, some of these sites are, if you didn't design them that way and something happened in the middle of the winter, you're not getting to them till, for at least another 6 months in some cases. So can you imagine explaining why you're off for 6 months?
Yeah. Wow. Hey, you touched on it earlier, but I want to chat a bit more about safety, because I was imagining that you go to some of these sites all by yourself. You're alone. Is that right?
In some cases, yes. I try to make sure that I'm going out there with, for instance, again, back to those local contractors. I try to make sure I'm going out there with a contract. But inevitably, there are times that I have to go to sites alone. And in that case, you always want to make sure somebody knows where you're going, when you're going to be there. You want to check in with them when you get there, and check in with them when you leave. And again, when you make it back to safety, like your hotel. And it sounds like a lot, but it is really important. And the other thing is, you may not always have cellular connectivity at some of these sites.
Yeah.
A lot of times we take for granted we can just pick up the cell phone, we can call and say, hey, I'm here. But that doesn't always work. So they make these little satellite beacons that you can get to check in. It'll send off a note to a bunch of predefined email addresses or SMS and say, hey, I made it, I'm safe. And you just do that, as your trip progresses. So that can be a helpful tool.
Huh. I hadn't heard of those things.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of the
mountainous areas like this. Yeah, and they make several different models. They have a couple now where you can actually text back and forth and use the satellite network to do that. I think they use the Iridium network or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And it's because what you don't want is for somebody to say, we haven't heard from Shane in 3 or 4 days. Yeah. And Shane's up there, with your arm gnawed off by a wildcat or something.
So yeah, my wife always knows where I'm at. She could stalk me via my iPhone, which is kind of handy. And then when I hit the locator beacon, she gets an email that says, "Hey, he's safe." And then I check. I always check in with people back at HQ and let them know that I'm safe, or when I've gotten to the site. So yeah, it's really critical. It seems like an extra step. Well, why would I need to do that? Well, if you're going out in the middle of somewhere where you might not be able to get back out. Weather can change at the drop of a hat out here. It may look just fine coming in. The forecast may look fine, but you may get up to that mountaintop and it may just start snowing like crazy, or raining, or whatever, and you may be up there for a little while. So that brings up another point. Always make sure that you have appropriate supplies packed in your vehicle as you go up the hill. Whether that be a snow vehicle, if you're going up there in a snow vehicle, whether it be your truck. Pack some extra food, pack an extra change of clothes, pack warmer clothes at least if you need to. Pack medical supplies, a little first aid kit. So you have to be prepared for these sites. Oh, and when it's snowing, pack a shovel. Pack several of them.
And that's when you really want to bring somebody. You don't want to be out there with you and a shovel and a stuck vehicle, and that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's where it really gets important in terms of being safe, and if the conditions are such that you might even remotely have a chance of getting stuck, bring somebody with you, or have somebody follow you. So if you get stuck going, say in mud, for instance, if you get stuck going into a site in the mud, at least they can stand a chance of pulling you back out. Once you get to that point.
Hey, Chris, in your working around New York City, how common is it for you to work alone at a transmitter site? Is it verboten, or do you often have to?
Well, when I worked for CBS, it was verboten, and we always made sure somebody was with you. If you couldn't have someone with you for whatever reason, then there was a procedure to contact the air studio or tech ops. But other places I've been at when I've done contract work, I usually set up an arrangement and make sure that they know where I'm at. I also set up a timer system. When I worked at a couple of places, I used to have a little light on in the studio. So whenever the transmitter door was opened up, it would set off a light. And the only way you could reset it was you had to call down to the transmitter building and say, "Hey, is somebody there?" And then they could reset it. Otherwise, it always stayed on. Especially at sites where I had co-location AM/FM, where the AM sites usually several acres of land. So, and you're someone in a remote location, so you tend to definitely want to have that warning system in place. Because even here in New Jersey, where I worked for several AM stations, where our properties were several acres and literally in the woods, you'd be surprised the number of not only animals but people that show up at these places that they think are very remote, so they're going to come out and do stuff. And you'd be surprised when you walk out of your transmitter building to go to the doghouse or the ATU, and all of a sudden you hear things rustling in the grass, and you're like, okay, that doesn't sound right. And somebody's head pops up, and you're like, oh, well, look at that. And can I help you? And now you're stuck. You got to figure out what's the plan. So as Shane points out, you do need to plan accordingly to wherever environment you're at. As in when I'm working on a project currently at a camp up in Sullivan County, New York, 12,000 acre camp. And last year and this year again, every time I travel to the camp, I have a certain kit with me that stays with me. It's two little high powered flashlights, a knife of a certain type, a two-way radio on the same radio frequencies as the camp camp staff, a cell phone, but it's pretty much useless out there, and several other things, change of shoes, clothing, a few things. Even though it's in Sullivan County, New York, and I could probably hike to a road somewhere at some point. You'd be surprised how isolated you can get very quickly on a 12,000 acre piece of land that's literally parts of the forest where I don't think anybody's seen it since the beginning. So it's interesting.
Wow.
Be prepared accordingly. I mean, even in New York City, at the transfer sites I've been to, not every site that I go to has restrooms, so you have to be prepared for that. At least at the site level, you may be able to get it downstairs, but anybody who's worked in this town knows getting the freight elevator to get back downstairs can take up to 45 minutes, if not longer.
It can take a while. Oh, never mind. I don't have to go anymore.
Yeah, you got to plan, and plus you have to remember too. And Shane, I'm sure, has experienced this when you're at transmitter sites that are running air conditioning systems, right? Air conditioning of any kind, especially if it's pressurized building. We're lucky to have a really good setup and it's positive pressure. The air gets dry. Guess what? You dehydrate. Your body starts saying, "Hey, I need something to hydrate myself." Make sure you bring some water with yourself. I know it sounds crazy. It is something you overlook. And you'd be surprised how quickly you work at the transmitter site and you say, "Well, I don't feel right." You're dehydrating.
Well, and especially at altitude, like out here, you'll dehydrate much quicker.
Hey,
but that's situational awareness is key.
Shane, I got one quick question before we go to our last break. And by the way, we're going to hear from you after the break, Shane. Shane's got a story about a transmitter that was off the air. And you're not going to believe the reason why. It's just amazing, and it has to do with frozen precipitation. So we're gonna get to that. But Shane, don't speak for yourself if you don't want to. But would it be typical for engineers in such remote places to be armed, to carry a firearm?
Oh boy, well that's another one where it really does come down to your personal preferences and convictions. But there are also some places where they have certain company policies. But I can speak for others out here that I know that in fact do carry when they go to sites, and probably rightfully so. I mean, you don't know what you're going to encounter when you go to some of these sites. I mean, Chris mentioned the head popping out at but I mean, it could be, that was completely innocent, but there could be somebody with malicious intent, out at some of these sites. You just don't know.
The good news is, at a site that's on top of a mountain that's hard to get to, if you're interested in doing somebody harm, if you're a bad guy, there's more easy pickings than that, probably.
Exactly.
It's not in town. Yeah.
I would be more concerned, quite frankly, about certain wildlife than I would about encountering, humans with ill intent up here.
Exactly. And I wouldn't want to kill any wildlife myself, but if it was me or the mountain lion or whatever you got there, the rabid wolf, I'm more interested in me walking away. But that's just me. Hey, you're watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode number 402. Shane Toven is here, along with Chris Tobin. And we're going to continue with the show in a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by my friends at Broadcasters General Store. If you don't have a relationship with these folks, if you don't know them, you need to get to know them. Really good folks. Anything you need from broadcast equipment, they've got it or they can get it, and they're so friendly. They've worked for years, literally decades, to work up a whole process system where they know about the gear they sell. They either have it in stock or can get it really quickly. They know when they can get it to you. They make payment easy. They make shipping easy. They stay in touch with you. They're a real pleasure to do business with. And I've been, since back in the day when I did engineering work for Sam, Sam Phillips of Elvis fame. Sam loved to order from Broadcaster General Store, and that's how I got involved with them. Well, there's a product that they want you to know about. It's new from Broadcast Tools, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. It's this Broadcast Tools Pro Mix 4. Now, what is the Pro Mix 4? Well, I'm glad to tell you. It is a compact, full-featured mono. That's mono. It's not stereo, so you can kind of guess what it's meant for. It's a mono audio mixing console, perfect for little voice studios or going out on remote. It features 3 combination mic line inputs, and yes, they've got those really cool connectors that take a 1/4-inch input or an XLR connection. So either mic or line that way. They have a dedicated 4th input that can be switched between being a balanced line input or the built-in USB audio interface. That is so handy. I've got a little console that the TWiRT show uses when we're out on remote. It's USB between it and my laptop, and that's amazing. Such a convenience to have. Well, that's built into this console as well, the Pro Mix 4 from Broadcast Tools. It has 3 built-in 1/4-inch stereo headphone outputs. They have individual controls for volume, mix, and pan, allowing custom headphone mixes. You got that one guy who can't hear, you crank his output up more, and the rest of you, keep your sanity. Other features include switch selectable program limiter built in, an XLR program output, monitor output with muting and volume control. It has a mix minus output for connection to an external telephone hybrid, and an on-air light relay output. A great choice for remote broadcast and podcasting applications. Hey, this podcast is done in mono, so this would be a great console to use for the podcaster. You can hook it right up to your laptop. You can broadcast live that way or bring in audio that way. You got your headphones for yourself and your guests, and you got your mic and line inputs right there. Wow, this is a great little console. Don Wingett had a big hand in designing this. He probably designed the whole thing. And Don, he designed some amazing gear, very efficient, does exactly what it's supposed to do, and does it quite reliably. The Broadcast Tools Pro Mix 4, I want to encourage you to have a look at that. And you know where to get it? Call Broadcasters General Store. I got the number memorized, from years and years of calling them. It's 352-622-7700. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. You find them on the web at bgs.cc. 5 little letters and a period. bgs.cc. They can get you what you want, and they're so friendly, so helpful. Love these guys. Been with them a long time. All right, we're about to finish up This Week in Radio Tech, episode 402. Chris, I forgot to mention to you or ask you if you had a tip this week. If you got something right away, great. If you don't, I got a little story from Shane.
Go with Shane's story. That'll be more fun. Trust me.
All right, let's listen in. Shane, you went to a transmitter site. Transmitter's off the air, and it's full of what?
So the other thing that we have out here that some of you aren't familiar with, some of those warmer climates, is this little thing called snow.
Yeah.
So, I had just started at Wyoming Public Media, and we get a call that the station, the other flamethrower over in Rock Springs, is off the air. Thinking to myself, I just started. I don't know the network all that well, so I go out there with the other engineer, and we drive up to the site, and immediately I'm thinking to myself, something's not right here. Again, using all of your senses when you get to the site, you just visually look at the outside of the building. You can see, wait a second, why is that door not closed all the way?
Oh,
why is there a big hole in the side of the building where there should be a ventilation unit? Okay, so we go inside the building and start looking. And I'm looking. Transmitter is completely dark, as expected. Won't power up. Nothing. Okay, so we start looking around. I open the PA cavity of the transmitter. This is another BE FM30. I see white stuff inside of the transmitter or in the PA cavity where there normally would be several kilovolts and lots of RF. That's not right. Okay, well, you know how a lot of times when you ventilate these rigs, there's a ductwork above it, and the heat gets ducted outside, right?
Right. Right.
So this one, I'm not a fan of doing it this way, but this is the way this particular one had been done. The ductwork went directly outside and was bolted straight to the top of the transmitter, right where the tuning sub would be. Where the tuning sub is on those transmitters, if you're familiar with them. There's a little access panel, a little access door. I open this access door, I look, and it's like, I can see outside, for one. I could see daylight through this access panel, and went, wait, that's not right. And I'm feeling wind just blowing at me like crazy. And I see, of course, it is just packed with snow. I'm like, oh no, this is not good. Yeah. So what had happened basically is this whole building, lock, stock, and barrel, and the transmitter, with the tube in it, with everything in it, plate transformer and all, had been moved from one mountaintop to another after the tower had fallen. That's another story entirely. Propane tank pulled down a guy wire. Anyway, this site had a string of bad luck, unfortunately.
Wow.
So now we have to figure out how to get this thing back on the air. So I start pulling the snow out, getting it, fortunately it hadn't melted all that much. I mean, it was still, the shack was cold, everything was cold. There was no heating in the shack. Start getting the snow out, and the more I dig, the more snow I find, but clean it up as best I can. Make sure that duct to the outside doesn't have snow blowing in it anymore. I look next at the tube socket, and I'm looking in there, and there are shards of ceramic coming out of the tube socket. Remember how I said this particular building had been moved from one mountaintop to another with the tube and the tube socket? Oh,
man.
And again, this all predated me. I had just started in this gig, and I'm thinking, oh, what have I gotten myself into? But to make a long story short, we got a replacement tube socket, got all the snow cleaned out, got the building repaired, the door, the air vent, went through the rig with a fine-tooth comb, bit by bit, finding power supplies that had been blown up and various other things. And then, of course, it started getting snow blown into the thing. And lo and behold, finally, at long last, moment of truth, hit plate on. No, not with a broomstick. And the rig comes up, and we're back on the air. This was
holy cow!
This was a space of like 6 months later, of course, because there was some lead time on the socket, and there was we had to get the thing all cleaned up. We were on like a little Crown FM 500 at the time, and just to keep us on the air, and that was into the main antenna. So at least we hadn't lost. I mean, we'd lost a lot of coverage, but at least 500 watts into the 5-bay antenna up on top of the tower was still mostly serving the area, at least the immediate area. But yeah, so.
Now let me ask you a couple follow-up questions. So this vent that went from the transmitter to the outside, did it not have a curve down at the end of it, or was it just did? Originally
it had a ventilation hood on it at the old mountaintop. But again, during the course of transportation, that hood fell off completely and was never replaced.
I see.
The thing is, this rig ran for, I don't know how long it ran like this, but presumably the blower had never dropped, but it just kept running and running and running. But the moment, I think what precipitated the whole event, no pun intended, was the filament. The filament had gone out or had gone down. The blower stopped, and then the wind. There was some back pressure from the transmitter. That back pressure from the transmitter was the only thing keeping all the snow out of that rig. It was a miracle that the thing stayed on the air. Yeah.
Oh. That's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. That is amazing. Go in there and find snow in the transmitter. I've heard of rain, of course, water from the broken roof. I've even heard of nacho chips in the transmitter because the overnight guy was heating up his nachos from the heat.
That's a new one on me.
Yeah, but but that didn't stop the transmitter from working. It was just every time and the engineer would clean it out, he'd say, "Wait a minute, why are there nacho chips in the transmitter?" Oh gosh, Chris, that was pretty entertaining. You ever had snow in a transmitter?
Snow, no, but I've had dead field animals in my tuning units for AM sites. Directional.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Get a call, we're off the air, and I come up there. I'm like, oh, look at that. There's only legs left. Yeah. It's interesting.
Anything bigger than mice or snakes?
No, thankfully not. But we have, no, wait a minute. I have had the raccoons try and chew through the heliac. So yeah, we did have one of those. Good thing is when they hit the right spot, they bounce off, and you stay on the air, but you lose pressure in the line. So
that's terrible.
Pressure going along like, oh,
I
see
what bad for laughing at that. Oh gosh.
Yeah. Wow. Sometimes you say to yourself, "Gee, I wish I could have saw that. It would have been fun." But but yeah.
Shane,
no, I've not had snow. No.
Yeah, I haven't either. Nothing I can remember. Shane, this has been enjoyable. We got to go. I really appreciate it. It's good to catch up with you. I haven't seen you for a while, so good to catch up. And I would love to get back to Laramie sometime. It's been almost 30 years since I've been there, and that would be just a great time to catch up with you and your wife, Andrea, and see how Laramie has changed since I was last there.
Yeah, drop in anytime. Just make sure to call first to make sure I'm not on a mountaintop.
That's right. Well, we could go to a mountaintop. We could do the show from a mountaintop together.
There you go.
Okay. If I ever get back to Laramie, that's what we'll do. Cool.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. We have got to go. And by the way, I think I'm going to be Shane. I think I'm going to be meeting with some of your colleagues in Denver. Any chance you're going to be in Denver?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like next week after next.
In fact, I think we're doing the show from somewhere in Denver. Maybe you can help me figure out a place to do the show from.
Oh, sure.
I guess that's in 2 weeks, right? Yeah, it's about 14 days from now. Okay. Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, 2 weeks from now, This Week in Radio Tech, I'll be in Denver visiting with Shane and some of his colleagues. So the meeting isn't part of the show, but we'll do the show from Denver. Chris, that'll be cool. I look forward to doing that. Chris, are you kind of in the New York area for a while now?
Yes, I'll be in the New York area. Yeah. Hopefully, maybe next week I find myself another location.
Okay. That's always good. Hey, and we have some interesting guests next week. I'm not sure I know all about them, but our booker says they're great. So we'll see how that goes. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be in Denver, and I'm not sure what's happening after that. But hey, thanks to our sponsors, our friends at Lavo with the Ruby console. Also, the folks at Telos with the Omnia 9 and the free upgrade to the Omnia 9. Plus, new Omnia 9s are now coming with LiveWire plus AES67 capability and the latest software already in them. And also thanks to the folks at Broadcasters General Store, where you can get the Broadcast Tools Pro Mix 4. Call BGS or check them out online at bgs.cc. That's it for us. Chris Tobin, thank you very much. Thanks to Suncast for producing the show. Thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. I'm Kirk Harnack. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.